So, after my seventh grade school year, I vividly remember my mom asking me, "Do you want to stay here in California or do you want to move with me to Arizona and live with me essentially?" And I'm sure as you can imagine, any seventh grader facing that kind of question or dilemma um, is going to have a hard time answering that question, especially if this seventh grader, me specifically, loves both of my parents equally, but in different ways, if you know what I mean. And to anybody who has divorced parents or even just two loving parents can understand exactly what I mean when I say that we love our parents equally, but our love is expressed to them in different ways and we view them in different ways. I'm sure as you can imagine, being faced with that dilemma at whatever age you are when you're in seventh grade is not easy at all, right? And long story short, I chose to stay with my dad here in California because, number one, as silly of a reason as this may sound, I recognized that my dad was, not, older than my mom, right? And if anything happened, I wanted to stay with him and to look after him, right? But I also felt like, as much as I do love my mom, um, the bond between a father and a son is special and it's totally different than a bond between a mother and a son, right? And, I'm not saying that I don't love my mom, but what I'm saying is the bond that I had with my dad was very special, and I recognized that. And I recognized that, one, growing up, every young man obviously needs his mother, but I think every young man especially needs his father to learn the lessons from his father's mistakes, and so that his father can ultimately pass on his legacy to his son. And that was why I made the decision to stay in California, essentially. It wasn't an easy decision at all. I remember the seventh grade summer leading into my eighth grade year, I was depressed. Long story short, I was depressed because, obviously, as I'm sure you can imagine, I missed my mom a lot. And that whole summer was honestly brutal because it was a big transition for me to really get used to not meeting my mom anymore on the weekends, and getting used to her being in a completely different state and having to call her as my main form of communication and my main form of really just seeing her, right, through FaceTime. One afternoon in particular, and this is just so vivid for me. There was one afternoon in particular where I went up to my dad and I just said, "Dad, I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm depressed as hell. Like, I'm happy that I'm staying here with you. I'm so grateful that you've allowed me to stay with you with open arms." And my dad has expressed to me many times, during that time, but also, before his passing, that he was so grateful that I chose to stay with him. And I told him at that time when I was young, when I was in seventh grade during the summertime leading up to my eighth grade school year, that, "Dad, I'm not gonna lie to you, I'm depressed. I have honestly no energy to do anything. Like, I miss mom a lot." And, this is nothing new that my dad hasn't already heard, right? I mean, he's told me many stories about when I was a young kid. I would feel the same way and tell him the same things because I missed my mom. And, at that time I wasn't really aware of what divorce really was. So I'd question him and ask him, like, "How come I'm living with you during some days of the week, but then other days of the week I'm living with mom?" Like, it didn't click for me at that time, right? And, I was young at that time, elementary school. But obviously the older I got, the more I realized that, yeah, now I know what divorce is. He basically just sat me down. He said, "I'm not going to lie to you, Dylan. Like, obviously, he knew that I was still young at that time, however old you are when you're in seventh grade, like 13, I think, 13, 12, 13, or 14, between those age ranges." He told me, he said, "Listen, I'm not going to lie to you." And he gave me probably one of the best reality checks that most people don't get from their parents at all, or don't get from their parents or really anybody in life until it's too late, right? Or until it's way down the line in life. He said that nobody's coming to save you and that you ultimately have to deal with the cards that you've been dealt with. To put it bluntly, although I was a boy, I think he wanted to instill the idea within me that I was a young man and that, I should view myself as a young man and begin, as harsh as it may sound, begin the process of manhood at that age, like become mature at a young age, but also still make time to enjoy my childhood as well, which he gave me the permission to do that, obviously, and he wanted to preserve my childhood innocence as long as possible. But he also gave me a harsh reality check because he knew that at the end of the day, he couldn't stop me from feeling those things, right? Because no matter what he wanted to do or what he could have said, it couldn't change the circumstances. So he realized that I had to do the changing within myself. And he told me, he said that nobody's coming to save you and that these are the cards you've been dealt with. And you have a choice. You can either be weak like most people are, or you can pick yourself up, deal with the cards you've been dealt with, and thrive and grow from this and really develop a sense of fortitude that most people never seem to develop in their whole entire lifetime, or develop way down the line. Like, you have a special opportunity here, and my dad instilled that perspective within me. And still to this day, even after his passing, I'm extremely grateful, because when I've told my closest friends this, and I don't have that many friends, like only like 2, but when I've told my friends this, they've told me, they said that, wow, it's kind of brutal to tell a young 7th grade kid that. But at the time, of course, I agreed with them, because yeah, I mean, that is very, very brutal, to tell a young 7th grade kid, for sure. But looking back on it now, especially after my dad's passing, I've realized that that moment ultimately shaped who I am right now, speaking to you in front of this camera. That moment changed me forever, more than I can explain. And for that, I'm extremely grateful. I wanted to provide that story because the prompt of this video is ultimately going to be a harsh reality check for young individuals, especially individuals who are part of Gen Z, my generation. I'm going to put it bluntly, and I'm not trying to come across as some masculine guru or masculinity coach or guru on the internet, on YouTube, who's trying to sell you a course on how to be a man and how to be this and that, because I ultimately believe that there's no course that can ultimately teach you how to become a man. Part of becoming a man, at least from what I know of so far, at least in my process of manhood, is that it's ultimately trial and error, and it's ultimately making mistakes and going through life yourself and failing on your own, failing forward. I wanted to preface that before I say what I have to say, because I'm not trying to come across as this complete know-it-all who's trying to tell you what to do and pointing my finger at you and saying you have to change, but completely disacknowledging my own flaws as a human being, because there's no such thing as a perfect human being. I believe that part of the problem with Gen Z today, my generation, and even just young individuals overall, not all, but most, is that we are extremely weak and mentally fragile. And I'm not saying this to call people out if you have mental disabilities, that this doesn't apply to you. I'm talking about people who have 2 loving parents, who are fortunate enough to be able to receive an education, who have a car to drive, who have loving parents, have a roof over their head, food on the table to eat every single day, warm clothes to wear during cold weather, a bed to sleep on, phones to watch, educational content on, or to watch videos on, entertainment devices. Like, if you have all of these things that these people from these third world countries, these war-torn third world countries don't have, and they, for a fact, wish they could be in your position, and you're still complaining, and you're complaining about how difficult your life is, I ultimately think that you're being ungrateful and that you are failing to recognize just how blessed you really are. I think this stems from the fact that my generation and just young individuals as a whole, we have become too attached to our emotions and letting our emotions dictate every single thing we do in life. And every decision we make is shaped around our emotions, right? And listen, I'm going to say something very unpopular and contrary to popular belief that is commonly spread by society, which is that we should lead our life based off of our emotions. We should, if we're not happy, something's inherently wrong with us. If we don't have a smile every single day on our face, something's wrong with us. If we're not happy 24/7, you're depressed, you have depression. And I just believe that that is completely false, because from what I know of, at least, I've never met a perfect human being who's happy 24/7 of the time. I've never. And if you know someone who's happy 24/7 of the time, dude, you got to give me their number so I can learn this from them, right? But I have yet to meet someone who's happy 24/7 of the time, and I think that ultimately it's about stability. I think stability is the most important thing in life. We as a society, we as a generation, the young generations, we have become way too fixated on our emotions. We have way too much attachment to them. The times in my life where I've been the most productive in my work, in my personal development, in my studies, school studies, and my extracurricular activities, and my, when I played athletics or when I was a part of athletics, when I played basketball, the times where I was the most productive and most effective in my work and in my routine and my practice was when I didn't even attach emotions to the work at all. When I didn't let my emotions dictate what it was that I had to do for that day. No, this video isn't about productivity. Maybe I'll make a separate video on that. And I actually have notes on the side right here, right? But essentially, we as Gen Z, we all know this. I'm not the first person to say this, but we have become extremely fragile, weak, and frankly soft. I just want to make one more thing clear too, right? Is that the world doesn't owe you anything. And I know that may be extremely hard to hear for young individuals like me, right? Young individuals a part of Gen Z, even younger, or maybe even older people too, right? Who still haven't had this mature realization, is that the world doesn't owe you anything. And listen, if you're someone who has gone through a lot of trauma and a lot of adversity in your life, this may be especially hard for you to hear too, right? But the world still doesn't owe you anything, no matter how much trauma or adversity you've been through in your life, how much suffering you've been through in your life. I want to give you an example. When I lost my dad recently, and you guys, the story behind me losing my dad is something you can look back on in the previous videos. I've made videos about this already. But, I lost my dad to cancer last May, in May of 2024, and I'm not going to lie to you, for the first couple of months after his death, I fell into a deep victim mindset. I didn't want to admit it to anybody. I didn't even want to admit it to myself, but that's the truth. I fell into a deep victim mindset of asking, why me? Why me, God? Like, why couldn't it have been any other person? Why me? Why couldn't it have been any other 20-year-old, right? I'm so close to finishing university, and yet you give me this shit. But I just said that. And ultimately, I came to this realization that this victim mindset, it's very, very, it's alluring. It's comfortable because it takes away the accountability factor, right? And it takes away the accountability factor of you taking action and full responsibility for your life, regardless of the suffering or regardless of the cards that you've been dealt with. That's why it's alluring to a lot of people. That's why you go out in public, right? And you talk to these kids, speaking for me personally, talking to these kids my age who just possess this deep victim mindset about, oh man, F this teacher, her coursework is too hard. She's a B word, she calls me all the time trying to embarrass me in front of everybody else. But at the end of the day though, let's be honest here, right? Nobody gives a shit. Nobody cares. And I know this isn't mind-blowing. This is just common sense, right? But I have to make a video like this because it's just about passing the message along, right? And I think it'd be especially helpful for young individuals to come across a video like this because the advice spread in this video is coming from a young individual like them. And the world doesn't owe you anything. It doesn't matter how much suffering or adversity you've been through in life. Life doesn't care. Success in life doesn't care at all. And, the excuses of I'm too sad, I'm too tired, I'm too exhausted, and I can't get up, and this and that, honestly, it doesn't matter. It's not going to get you anywhere in life. And listen, I'm not saying these things to, force you to adopt the mindset of completely discrediting your emotions, because that's impossible. We are all human beings and we all have emotions. We're not robots. It's a part of the human experience to fail and to go through adversity in life and to suffer and to maybe even feel depressed sometimes, right? And to ultimately sometimes ask, why me? I want to remind you of a quote that I first read from Dune, the book series. And it's from a character in Dune. I forgot who the character is, but one of the most profound lines from the series is, life is not something to be understood, but rather a reality to experience. And I think that that's what my generation's forgetting the most. I think that's what everybody's forgetting the most, is that we're trying to control everything. We're trying to make everything go our way, when in reality, that's just completely against the whole meaning of life. Like, what you might ask, what is living? You see those videos all the time. Like, what is the purpose of life on YouTube? Like these self-improvement videos circulating the self-improvement sphere on YouTube, right? Of, how to find your purpose in life, what it really means to quote unquote live. My take on it, at least, and you may not agree with me, but my take on it is, you watching this video right now, right? You're living. Experiencing is living. Not control, but accepting what is, right? And I think that when I adopted that mindset, especially after, my dad's death, it took me a couple months. I'm still kind of letting it seep in, but it's much better now. I'm much better now in terms of adopting that mindset, is when I ultimately felt liberated, when I tried to stop controlling everything and to just started doing and being, essentially, and stop thinking too much. So if you're someone who's my age, right, and you're in university, or if you're in high school, or maybe even younger, right, or maybe even older as well, and you're going through a lot of adversity in life, and you come across this video and you're thinking to yourself, what the hell does this 20-year-old kid know about life? He hasn't been around the block yet. He proclaims himself to be a man, which I don't. But that's what these people may think, because they're judging before they actually hear what it is I have to say. My advice to you is, stop thinking so much and start living. As corny and cliche as that may sound, we think way too much. And listen, there's no problem with thinking, because we should always think before we do. But I think society's heading in that direction where people are thinking way too much, decision paralysis. And especially in an age like this, where information is just constant. It's constant information overload, constant stimulation of information, right? Where we're faced with so many options on social media, on YouTube, on X, on Instagram, on Snapchat, or whatever, TikTok. Well, I think TikTok's banned now, but whatever social media platform you may use, we're faced with so many options that we get caught up in this hamster wheel of just, thinking that, okay, not this video, but maybe the next video will provide me with the ultimate cure or solution for my life. But what we don't realize is that we're in this constant, never-ending hamster wheel cycle of trying to find that solution, that magical solution. But we never do. This is my life we're talking about here. And ultimately, at the end of the day, nobody can tell me how to live my life. That's up to me to figure out on my own. And the world doesn't care about how tired I am, how exhausted I am, and how depressed I am with grief over my dad's death. The world doesn't care, because the world has its own fair share of problems. People in life have their own fair share of problems. They may feel sympathetic and empathetic, but at the end of the day, though, they have their own lives to live as well. And ultimately, to realize that and to really accept that, truly accept that, so liberating. So liberating. I'm so grateful for what I have in my life, and I'm so grateful for everything my dad has left behind for me, because he's left me more than enough. And I'm so grateful, and I'm not oblivious to the fact that I could be in a much worse situation, like most kids are out there in the world who do lose their parents, like these kids in Palestine and in Gaza and in Israel, and in these third world countries who have lost their parents to disease, death, or whatever. Just even in America or just anywhere, have lost their parents at a young age, who don't have what I have, and I have more than enough. And I feel as if I have a moral obligation to use the comfort of my situation for good, essentially, and to use this privilege to lift other people up in the best way that I possibly can. And it's not going to be easy by any means. There are going to be many people who come across mine and Ohm's videos on this channel and probably judge us and think that we don't know what it is we're talking about, and probably think that we're out of our minds, and that we're losing our marbles, and that we have no place to provide advice at all, considering how young we are. And I totally get that perspective, totally get it. But if there's one thing I've learned in life, it's that you should always be careful who it is you take advice from, especially when it comes to people who try to give you advice and you don't want to end up being in the same place as them. Like, why would you take advice from a broke person when you want to acquire wealth in your life, essentially, as harsh as that may sound? But at the end of the day, though, you should always keep an open mind and just be open to all these different perspectives, is what I'm trying to say. Some of you, I know for a fact, I don't know who it is who's watching this video right now. I don't know who you are. I don't know what it is you've been through in life. For all I know, you could be on the verge of suicide right now, as harsh as that may sound, but it's a reality for most people nowadays. And we all have our low moments in life. All of us do, right? And by no means is that, you might be thinking to yourself, yeah, well, no, well, of course, dummy. Like, everybody tells you that when I'm depressed, like, life could be better, and, everybody has their low moments. You probably don't want to hear that. But what I'm trying to say is that I can't provide you advice on how to solve depression because I'm not a clinical psychiatrist or therapist or whatever. Like, most of the advice I'd give on how to solve depression would be, pseudoscience, I guess, in a way, or whatever the term is, or, I guess sharing my faith, which I will share in another video, talking about my testimony of coming to God and coming to Christ. But I just want to say that you're worth so much more than you can imagine. And that's extremely corny and cliche to say because you hear that in Disney movies and, that's the common traditional self-help advice, but it really is true, and I really wish that I could go back in time and tell that young kid who was depressed after his mom moved away, and I've told him that it's going to be okay and like it'll work out, but you have to stay strong enough to wait and let it work out on its own. Let life work out. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. You just have to keep on trying to put one foot in front of the other every single day of life that you're given, and ultimately recognize that in the end, look, this is going to sound like a very nihilistic perspective to have, right? But when in doubt, reflect on your mortality and realize that it's, at the end of the day, it's not going to matter. It's not going to matter at all. These trivial things that we worry about right now, especially young individuals, right? These trivial things, this failed relationship, he or she broke up with me and I'm depressed now. I thought they were the love of my life, and my career doesn't look like it's working out, and I haven't gotten that dream job yet. Number one, just keep on holding on, right? And keep trying. Never stop having faith, and especially never stop putting in the work too, right? Just because you're going through a hard time doesn't mean that's not a whole pass. Stop working hard. And then number three, recognize that in the end, it's when you look back and when you're on your deathbed, or whenever you pass, which I hope you live a long and healthy life, or live as long as possible. But whenever you pass and whenever you're on your deathbed, you're gonna realize that, man, those things that I worried about, they really were nothing. And speaking for myself personally, when I look back at all those times of difficulty in my life, especially, very recently when I lost my dad, I realized that, yeah, it sucked, but it's ultimately making me who I am. It's making me into this person who's somehow mustering up the balls to stand in front of a camera and talk to whoever's watching this video right now. And that's what life is all about. Our scars make us who we are, and we shouldn't run away from them or hide them or disacknowledge them at all. I think true courage is embracing those scars and not necessarily letting them define who we are, but letting them forge us into stronger individuals and better individuals, and to make sure that level of suffering that you endured doesn't happen to anybody else, and sharing your mistakes with them. Recognize that at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, it's going to be on you, right? When we die, and regardless of whatever you believe in, I believe that when we all die, we're all going to come face to face with God, and we're all going to be judged for our actions. And when that time comes, you cannot blame anybody else for what you've done in your life. It's going to be on you, right? No matter the suffering, no matter the trauma you've endured in your life, it's going to be on you. So yeah, thank you so much for watching this video, and I look forward to making more videos and inspiring as many people as possible. And I know Ohm feels the exact same way as well. And whoever you are, whatever it is you're going through in life, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay, and you have the strength to endure it, and you also have the strength to thrive and develop from it as well, and you're going to come out on top in the end, as cliche and corny as that may sound. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.